Hello and welcome back to the Motorsport Better podcast. I'm your host DD, and joining me today once again is my friend and your co-host Vedant. On this episode, we'll be talking about Formula E season opener. So let's grab some chai, take our seats, ready our opinions, and dive right into the conversation. Hello Vedant. First race of the season, first circuit racing race of the season for us.
Yep,
And there's circuit racing race of the season for us.
yep.
And there's a lot to talk about. There's a lot of storylines. There's a lot to talk about. But obviously, the biggest question here is: did the Formula E season 9 opener at Mexico City deliver? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I would say yes. The racing was incredible in the middle, but overall there was low attrition. There was teams were still struggling, but it was good enough for a good season opener.
And I think you just pointed out the biggest win for Formula E as an organization and all the teams in this season opener. Because going into the season opener, the biggest question was, are we going to be able to avoid big wrecks, big accidents, which might injure the drivers? Because those who have been following Formula E even for a month now will know that the emergency brake system that Formula E is trying to introduce for the Gen 3 cars is not here. So the biggest question mark, the biggest issue was to avoid any big failures, mechanical, brake, whatever, and to avoid any big shunts, which Formula E has done beautifully. It's a big win for Formula E there, and I think they'll be more than happy to take that and walk away, even if they hadn't had a great season opener, which they have done. And so I'm pretty sure they're happy. Obviously, Saudi is a different beast. It's a high-speed street circuit where the probability of damage is high because the average speeds will be higher and things like that. So teams will still be hoping to get the emergency brake system in before Saudi, but that's a different issue altogether. Let's talk about what happened today.
Even Mexico is supposedly a high speed circuit, right? There are long straights, and Formula E added a chicane before turn 12 to mitigate that risk.
Yeah.
But yeah, Saudi is different. But see, but it was a different. The circumstances were different. He did break his wrist, but it was not due to some mechanical failure or some greater issue as such. And yeah, we just wish him the fastest recovery and hope he's back in the year.
Absolutely. Go on.
The year.
Absolutely. Go on. Give us your thoughts on how the race panned out. What were the storylines you were looking at, and what are your biggest takeaways from the race? And I'm sure there's, and I can anticipate a few things because I know what you might have been looking forward to. But anyway.
Yeah. But being the biggest surprise, I would say, because Porsche were good till last season, but they weren't leading or they weren't doing anything great. They were in the midfield, in the upper midfield, let's say. But I think the pace that Jake Dennis showed and the pace that they were ahead by miles. Like Jake Dennis had a lead of 7 seconds ahead of
Sorry. I think it was like 4 or 5 seconds before the safety car came out, and then again,
exactly,
5 to 6 seconds. Yes.
And that was ahead of Pascal Wehrlein, and Pascal Wehrlein came from 6th to 2nd and had a lead of 4-5 seconds ahead of Degrassi, right? So the Porsche powertrain seems to be performing good, and you would expect Jake Dennis and Pascal Wehrlein to be the team leaders in their respective teams. So it bodes perfectly well for them.
The way Porsche have started the season, it's absolutely immaculate. But there is a caveat to that particular, let's say, analysis that you have just done.
Yep.
And that is Porsche have always been very strong at Mexico City. Very strong. So even during the post-race interview, Pascal Wehrlein pointed out that, even last year, and I think so did Lucas Degrassi, that last year, Porsche did like a 1-2 and ran away with it. So, yes, Porsche, they might not have looked so strong in practice and back in Valencia, but definitely they have started the season strong. They seem to have the fastest and the most efficient powertrain on the grid.
Yeah.
By far, at least based on the little data that we have, based on today's race and qualifying so far. Everything is getting lined up, and I think... but another caveat to add to that, if you remember last year, even though Porsche, I think the Porsche factory team basically had a better year than the Avalanche and Andretti team. better year than the Avalanche and Andretti team. However, if you cast your mind back to the very start of the season 8, uh, Avalanche and Andretti had a better start to the season compared to Porsche. So that is another thing to look out for because,
But I don't think Avalanche Andretti was using Porsche in season 8, were they?
but it's also a team thing, right? Like them using the same powertrain. It's about them as a
Yeah, that's
team and
true.
how
That's
they're
true.
operating because they started off really well and then they fell off. We didn't see Jake Dennis anywhere until basically this race this season after the first couple of races where it was looking like he could contend for the championship with the Avalanche and Andretti team. So there's a couple caveats. That's all I'm saying. There's a couple caveats in there to the analysis and to the performance that Porsche have had today, but nonetheless, it's a great start to the season for them.
Hey, see, the caveats are all welcome. It's only one race in. It's. I mean, nobody knows if Porsche or like Jake Dennis might finish last in the next two races, and it would still be a normal course of events in Formula E terms, right?
Yes, absolutely.
So it's just the beginning. But what we see from Porsche, what we see from Andretti and Jake Dennis especially, is positive. So yeah, excited for the season in that. And Jake Hughes, who had a wonderful drive as a rookie. It was his first race in Formula E. So like he put Degrassi under pressure, but it was the drive of a lifetime sort of thing for Lucas
We'll come
Degrassi,
to
right?
Degrassi in a bit. Let's cover Jake
Yeah,
Hughes.
yeah.
Let's cover Jake Hughes. I mean, Degrassi
Yeah.
stole the show. There were more cameras on him than on Jake Dennis throughout the race. So
Absolutely,
let's not
absolutely.
we'll come back to him in a bit.
But Jake Hughes, yeah, brilliant in qualifying. He qualified P3, and yeah, a very good race for a rookie. Just managing his energy management was better than the people around him, and yeah, like
A very mature driver is
I
the
mean,
way
it was
I would put it. For a first race, a very mature driver, a very calculated driver.
Yeah,
in Formula E.
exactly.
He didn't get upset that he couldn't make the moves on Lucas Degrassi. He didn't get upset that he was coming under pressure from the. He drove a very calculated race. He did get a little dinged about by Andre Lauter, but that is to be expected if you're racing Andre Lauter in any series anywhere. He is a physical man. He will not, stop from bashing you about and bashing your car about just to make up a place. So I think
See-
Jake Hughes in that aspect has a lot to learn as to what does taking out your elbows really means in Formula E, even if it's a fragile car.
absolutely. Talking about Andre Lauter, you said Andre Lauter will push you around. Like he's the most experienced driver in Formula E right now, as a experience of motorsport basically. And that shows because the way Andre Lauter lined up that move in the last lap was just brilliant. In into turn one, he went right outside the track limits. Like he lined a perfectly straight sort of racing line into turn one and out of turn two, because he was out sort of racing line into turn one and out of turn two, because he was outside the white lines when braking into turn one, right? So it was a very good move when you look at it, and that lined him up for a move into turn two, I guess, or two or three, whatever it was. So it was a great move, and it was. So it was a great move, and just shows what experience brings in a way. But yeah, Andre Lauter, like again, Porsche performing. No, sorry, he's in Porsche
Yeah.
powertrain. Yeah. Sorry, my bad.
But it bodes well for Jake Hughes, a very mature drive. Yes, a lot of times you heard Foxtrot during the race, but given that he's up against Rene Rast, who has a lot of experience in Formula E and has come back now, but
He only has one season of experience, Rene Rast, in Formula E, I guess. Yeah.
I guess so. But he has some previous
Yeah.
experience compared to
Yeah.
no experience of Jake
Yeah.
Hughes. But
Sorry.
but all the seasons get mixed up that have happened before season 8 to say so. It's all one lump of racing. But anyway, but again, Rene Rast was nowhere near Jake Hughes. He didn't challenge him at
Yep.
all in terms of speed, time, whatever. So Jake Hughes, is clearly the team leader and a young team leader, that too. But talking about Jake Hughes, we also have to mention in the same breath Sasha Fenestras, who was also technically making his debut in Formula E.
Yep.
This is his debut season in Formula E. And great qualifying. Had a great first half to the race, but then it seems the energy management did not pay off for him in that Nissan car. Nonetheless, he showed great speed, and I think that bodes well for him. And while talking about teams that usually don't do that well, but I have moved up the order, we have to talk about Dan
Yeah,
Ticktum.
absolutely.
What a I tuned into qualifying this morning, and Group B qualifying had just started, and I saw Dan Ticktum leading the charts, and I'm like, well, there's still Ticktum leading the charts, and I'm like, well, there's still 4.5 minutes left or whatever, right?
Yeah.
The minutes are ticking down. The minutes are ticking. Dan Ticktum is still leading, and then I think we had Jake Dennis only just ahead of Dan Ticktum by two tenths of a second, and I'm waiting, and the clock is ticking down, but no one is able to beat Dan Ticktum during that group. I'm like, what is happening here? Did not expect Neo 333 to be anywhere close to the qualifying duels, really. But I think a lot of people have said, that obviously these teams who were languishing at the bottom of the order last year have had more time to develop their powertrains compared to some of the teams that were competing for the championship.
What is coming out of the paddock, and I think Oliver Askew said that in commentary as well. So it may be true. It may be true because the cars were released and given to the teams in the middle of the season, right? So it may be true, but I mean, brilliant performance from the new 333 team, Dan Ticktum and even Sergio Sette Camara. Like he was still decent in qualifying as well. I don't know what happened to Dan Ticktum in the race and in the end because
He had a drive-through
for
penalty
overcharge, yeah.
pretty early on in the race because of
Yeah, and
overcharge. Yeah.
I mean, we can come to it as flow of the software technicalities.
Let's just get to it. We'll get to Lucas Di Grassi when we get to Lucas Di Grassi because there's a lot around him.
Yeah.
It's fine. We don't.
So like one of the biggest issues, not issues, but what I saw was there were a lot of software issues this weekend, and which is fair. This weekend, and which is fair because it's a new car again. New season, new everything. But Mitch Evans had a software issue in FP2 which led him to crash the car. Dan Ticktum had some sort of software issue in the race which led to the overcharge, yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
And I think there were a few more software issues. I didn't write them in my notes, but they were still.
I think the Sam Bird crash also seemed like a software issue, or not the Sam Bird crash, the crash that happened in front of
The Robbins Fines crash, yeah.
Yeah. So that also seemed like a weird issue that the car,
just
happened.
Yeah, it like in the corner in the chicane, it just happened. Yep. And Sam Bird was a mechanical failure, but yeah, I guess software issues were a point, but I guess we'll just they'll just keep them improving as time goes on.
But we've seen the software issues even during the past seasons. It's not something new to Formula E. We've seen a lot of people lose races, be disqualified because of that overcharge or overconsumption of energy issue. I think that is an existing issue within Formula E since a long time. I think there was a time when we talked about rules and regulations around these spikes that may need to be changed instead of having such a harsh penalty, almost you could say. Because these spikes don't really last long enough compared to the drive-through penalty that Dan Ticktum got today. So the reason the regulations give such a harsh penalty so that the teams move towards a better solution technologically instead of trying to exploit it in any other way if the regulations are to be relaxed, to say so, right? So that is another thing to keep in mind. But there's not a lot you can keep in mind. But there's not a lot you can do about it until the teams can get their hands dirty with the tech for a little bit longer at least.
Yeah, I remember I think it was last season or the season before that. It was again Neo 333, if I remember it correctly. A jump in Rome, I guess it was, and that led to another overcharge, and that led to another penalty. And it was no one's fault, right? It wasn't a.
Yeah, it was that weird kink in the road in Rome.
So it was not the driver's fault and it wasn't the team's fault, but it was not the driver's fault and it wasn't the team's fault, but it was there, and the penalty happened.
Yeah, I think it's time now. I think it's time to talk about Mahindra Racing and Lucas Di Grassi. Just go for it.
Yeah, well, a great start to be fair. You're winning pole position, getting the 3 points. I don't know what happened there. He lost. He made a mistake. He made a mistake when he lost out to Jake Dennis, and that was very uncharacteristic because it was a very weird place to make a mistake. But after that, he sort of overconsumed and had efficiency issues in the middle.
Yeah, I think that's probably one of the best defensive races I've seen in a long, long time. I think Jack Nichols on the commentary said that he rated this drive from Lucas Di Grassi as Lucas Di Grassi's best
Yeah.
drive
Yeah.
ever in Formula E, which is something coming from the lead commentator of Formula E, who's been there literally forever since the series started. Coming from the lead commentator of Formula E, who's been there literally forever since the series started.
From day one. Yeah.
Yeah. So that is that is some high honor. But
I mean, there might be a recency bias, but it was still one of the best.
Fair enough. But yeah, definitely. Not just for him, but for everyone watching back
for
home,
anyone,
and
yeah.
especially
Yeah.
for the supporters of Mahindra. Now, obviously, I'll have to say Lucas Di Grassi was probably the luckiest man in Mexico City today. after after being handed the pole, thanks to the avalanche, not just drivers, making 2 consecutive mistakes. He held it together. Jake Hughes could not mount a challenge, and thankfully it was Jake Hughes who was between himself and Andre Lauter. Otherwise, I don't think there was anyone or anything in this world that could have stopped Lucas Di Grassi and Andre Lauter from coming together during the race. If they've stopped Lucas Di Grassi and Andre Lauter from coming together during the race, if both of them had gone up against each other for that long.
It could be said that Jake Hughes was trying to just protect his car and come back in one piece on his debut.
Yeah.
To just make that point and get just make that point and get just have a good debut, and you could attack 100% from the next race onwards.
Absolutely. But in terms of the pace we've seen from Mahindra, it seems like as far as the pace is concerned, they might be number 2 or number 3. They are obviously not as fast as might be up there with the Jaguars and the Nissan that the McLaren are running.
Yeah.
However, it is quite clear that Mahindra is still struggling with efficiency issues, which is why even the season 9 was plagued with efficiency issues. There were so many times we saw Alexander Sims and Oliver Rowland make their way up. So many times we saw Alexander Sims and Oliver Rowland make their way up the grid, really attack during the first half of the race, but then fall off because of efficiency issues. So clearly that powertrain is still struggling with efficiency, and if they don't work on that, there are only so many circuits where Lucas Di Grassi and Oliver Rowland can save them by driving such a defense. Andre Lauter, in the future maybe Jev and Da Costa too. So
Yep.
they won't have a lot of races where they'll be able to drive defensively and take home such great points at the end of the day, and even a podium finish. So I think that is of concern. Obviously, that new team principal seemed overjoyed. I think it was a little bit too much celebration in my opinion, but great to have a team principal who does not hold back emotions, and you can see when he's excited, you can see when he's upset, and that stuff.
Not hold back emotions was what described Dilbagh Gill, right?
Yeah, so I guess it's a one-to-one replacement, it's a one-to-one replacement in that way. But Mahindra has a long way to go. If I were to evaluate today's performance, and basically say where I would see Mahindra slot in over the next 4 or 5 races, I would say they would be somewhere P7, P8 on average in terms of pace and efficiency. Behind, obviously behind the Porsche powertrains, and then they would be behind the Nissan of the McLarens, maybe not the Nissan factory team, but also along with the Jaguar Envision Racing and the TCS team. So there will be somewhere in the mix between P7, P8 towards the high end, and then towards P12 and P13 towards the lower end. However, I think let's not overlook what happened today, and it was a great performance regardless of what the circumstances were and what was required of the Mahindra team to make it happen.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was a good weekend. Even Di Grassi's pole lap was a complete second slower than Jake Dennis's semis lap, right? So that just shows you the difference in pace there is. But I mean, at the end of the day, we got the like Mahindra got the results and 18 points and happy to go home with the points.
Yeah, and if you remember, Lucas Degrassi was the man who beat out Pascal Wehrlein when Pascal was in Mahindra, and
Yeah,
took away the win. So
yeah,
that's payback to Mahindra after they signed him. So that's how I look at it.
yeah.
That's how I look at it. But anyway, I
Yeah.
think let's talk about the biggest shocks, and I think the biggest shock that we did not see, coming as we headed into the season opener was the DS Penske team. They were languishing in P10, P11 pretty much all throughout the race. Couldn't make it. Ski team. They were languishing in P10, P11 pretty much all throughout the race. Couldn't make it to the duels in qualifying. So all in all, a really bad weekend for them. And I think Jev ran out of energy towards the end of the race and finished outside the points. And I think Stoffel Vandon brought home a solitary point
Yeah,
for
just a
the
single
DS
point.
Penske team. Seemed like the strongest team during testing. They seemed like the strongest team. Even yesterday, one of the stronger teams. But it just seemed to fall apart for them as soon as qualifying started.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like, I don't know what happened there, but clearly they seem to be the stronger team in test practice and everywhere. But yeah, I guess it's one of those things of a new generation of cars. Like in testing and in practice, other teams might be running different scenarios and different things. Like who knows what happened there? But it was absolutely shocking to say the least.
Yep. And one thing we were not, I think one of our expectations, which was also sort of did not come true. One of our predictions, if you want to say it like that, was Jaguar having a bad time. Yes, Sam Bird had an absolutely terrible weekend, one to actually forget. He's in Mexico. He can get a lot of. But the rest of the Jaguar team, I think they had a decent weekend compared to what we were expecting of them coming into the season opener. They finished all in top 10 besides Sam Bird, I think. And when I say all, I also am counting the other cars that are powered by the Jaguar powertrain. So all in all, it was not a bad weekend, and they seem to be on pace with Nissan, and have a decent powertrain, compared to Mahindra, who finished on the podium today. Yes, Porsche seem to be in a different league, but I think there's much to celebrate for. Now I'm forgetting his name. Who's the team principal of Jaguar? But anyway, so I think there's a lot for them to celebrate, right? And to take away from this weekend. It's not as bad as it looked during testing. It's not as bad as it looked during practice. And they
Yep.
are on pace with the rest of the teams. And they are ahead of DS Penske, which should be a win in my opinion to them, given the season-long
Yeah.
rivalry they had last season, right?
Yeah,
So
absolutely. Yeah,
so I,
absolutely.
I think that's a great takeaway.
Yeah, the only mechanical failure we had was from Jaguar, Sam Bird's differential breaking down essentially. But the like it was just the single issue, and apart from Mitch Evans is software. I mean, it was an up and down weekend for them, but yeah, not as bad as anyone would like as we were expecting, or and they would be happy with what they got. Like they could have wanted more, obviously, but
Yeah,
happy with
yeah,
what they got.
definitely. That brings us to the last couple of points. Now, obviously, we had the new time attack system, not time attack, sorry, attack system implemented
Attack
in
mode.
in the season opener. What were your thoughts about that? I don't think it created much of a difference. Yeah, I don't really know what to add. There just isn't enough data for me to like really comment on it. In my opinion, it didn't make a huge difference. What was interesting though was that attack mode is still based on time, whereas we have moved on to laps in all other measures, whether that is the race duration or the amount of time added at the end of the race based on safety car time and that sort of stuff. So I was almost hoping, I
Yep.
guess, that attack mode would also be measured in laps, so 1 lap, 2 lap, and so on and so forth. But they still have it in minutes for some reason. So that's also quite interesting, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's an interesting point you bring up, and I mean, obviously, the Formula E organization probably would have thought about it, but I don't think anyone apart from that organization would have essentially thought about having that in laps as well. But yeah, I guess the new system doesn't really give you much of a continuous boost in a way to make to create a move and make a move, but but it certainly gives you some sort of strategic play, because it's not that you take it and just apply it and everyone has the same. The offset essentially might give you some, but had it been, let's say, 7 or 8 minutes in total, and you get 4-3 or 4-4, something like that, it would have been much more effective.
I mean,
But splitting 4 minutes into two is not really
yeah, I
effective.
mean,
I feel.
you captured the thought behind why this system was introduced, but yeah, given like how short the duration is, it's hard to see how it's gonna make a huge impact. And I think the only time we're gonna see an impact is where someone with 3 minutes of attack mode can gain a couple positions as the race is approaching the end, right? Because it early on in the race, and it worked for him
Yep.
tactically because he could keep up, you know, with the other cars around him who took attack mode at different times. But that might not be the case every time. So I don't think it's creating a huge difference in terms of what we are seeing across the race.
I mean, see, till last year also, I guess we had 8 minute split variable depending on tracks and different circumstances, right? There was no set time. The time was defined just prior to the race start, and you had to make do with it. But I remember clearly at times there were two 4 minute attack
Yeah,
modes
yeah, yeah.
given out. Attack
Yeah,
modes
yeah, yeah.
given out, right? So that creates, like, 4 minutes is a good time to create a move. With 4 minutes, you can get in 2 laps or 3 laps, or 2.5 laps or 3 laps, I guess. And it gives you a good time to create a move and do a move and defend it. Or just like if the driver ahead takes attack mode and you create a gap enough and like things like that. So yeah, splitting 4 minutes into two is not really working out. And I was trying to see if 1-3 and 3-1 would create any difference, because I guess the first two drivers who took attack mode, one of them took 1-3 and the other took 3-1. So I was trying, and they were right behind each other, right? So I was trying to see if that made a difference, but yeah, it didn't. So
Yeah, and the next point is exactly why it may not make as much of a difference Gen 2 cars. And I think a lot of drivers spoke about this, and that was it is very difficult to already put down the power that they have in normal mode, which is in the mode that they're racing in, without that extra power during attack mode. So it's already very difficult because of reduced grip with the new tires, the lighter cars, and having more power to put down that much power onto how twitchy the cars were, how difficult it was for a lot of drivers. Especially it was really apparent during the duels. We saw Jake Hughes struggle a little bit a couple times. We saw a couple people get knocked out because of not being able to put down the power in the last corner.
the last corner was horrendous. Yep.
Exactly. So the drivers are really struggling.
Horrendous. Yep.
Exactly. So the drivers are really struggling to put down the power. So the extra power during attack mode isn't exactly helpful. And I think before the race, Lucas de Grassi pointed out that with these cars, it's going to be a lot harder to overtake. And I think that is somewhat what we saw during today's race also, was that it wasn't exactly very easy. During today's race also was that it wasn't exactly very easy to attack using these to overtake using these cars, and even the attack mode was not making a huge difference. And I think the fact that you are not able, the drivers are not being able to put the power down as easily or as cleanly because there's too much torque, is the reason why that attack mode is almost as powerful as Formula E might have intended it to be.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the cars were too twitchy, as you said. With the extra torque, if you put in too much power, the wheel spin will.
And you're just destroying your tires at that point.
You're destroying your tires and you're taking away.
Tires at that point.
You're destroying your tires and you're taking away the energy. Like, you're over consuming
Yeah,
at
yeah.
that point, right? So, yeah, I guess that is what the issue probably is here. Absolutely.
Yeah, I wonder if teams will almost play with the idea of, just having conserve energy almost so that they can operate at a lesser power, which provides them a better, let's say, provides better drivability to the driver, make the
Yeah.
car more drivable.
Yeah,
Uh,
it increases the driver control and comfort,
yeah, even if
sort
even
of
if let's say the peak
control and comfort,
yeah
sort
even
of.
if let's say the peak power delivery is a little bit lesser than what is allowed by the rules, let's say, right?
Yep,
So
yep,
I
yep.
wonder if the teams might want to play with that a little bit, and that will also allow them to conserve a little bit of energy, instead of having the driver manage the energy consumption throughout the race. The idea, or if that is just stupid, but I can just throwing it out there to see if anyone knows more about it. But yeah, that's all from my side, Vedant. Anything else that you want to talk about before we wrap up this podcast?
Uh, I do not have anything else to talk about. Edo Motara had a strange incident. Talk about. Edo Motara had a strange incident where he spun out, so which was weird. But yeah, I guess we have covered everything that I had written down.
All
Yep.
right, yeah. So that's all from our side. Before I go, one last question though. How are the cars growing on you so far?
And this is something Sam Smith said in the race Formula E podcast after testing, that when you see these cars next to each other racing, they grow on you, and you don't mind them as much as you might mind them looking at them. And during qualifying, I was like, I wasn't taken aback, or I wasn't really,
It wasn't jarring
yeah, it
to see
wasn't
the cars.
affecting my enjoyment, sort of.
Yeah, yeah. Fair enough. What I'll say is my biggest disappointment with the new cars was the Mahindra livery.
Yeah,
Cars was the Mahindra livery.
yeah,
Say what you may about the new cars, but that livery is not doing it any favors either.
absolutely not.
Having seen the Mahindra livery in person last year, I absolutely loved it. It was a beautiful color, and a really simple livery, and I would have loved to see that continue with this, the Gen 3 cars also. But that it was not red, copper, and blue, I guess.
The copper is too bad. Yeah,
Yeah. So I'm not sure who made the decisions there, but not a favorite. I can tell you that.
yeah.
But
I mean,
that's all from.
even when their race suits first came out, Twitter was all like, like, what's this, dude? you know. So
Uh,
yeah,
yeah, so a little bit sad about it. But thank you for joining me once again, Vedant. And as always, we'll come back tomorrow to recap the Dakar Rally. So I'll see you again in a bit.